The Justice Department released a new batch of files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein earlier today. Our CBS News team is hard at work pouring through thousands of printed documents, photos, videos, audio recordings, and more at this hour. I want to bring in Sharlene Rochard. She is an Epstein survivor that is sharing her story with us tonight. Thank you for joining me, Sharlene. I know that you've only recently started sharing your story and experience with Jeffrey Epstein, so I know it is still very raw and hard to talk about it. How did you first get connected with him as a young model at the time?
I was modeling in New York, and a friend of mine suggested that I meet Jeffrey, that I would have some more opportunities. And it started from there. Basically, I went to his New York home and he gave me a book on how to give massages, and I thought I had a job.
I know the memories must be haunting. Some of these documents we are now seeing are heavily redacted, and some of the materials are already in the public domain. Is this holding Epstein's associates accountable in this release? Is it sufficient?
Well, this is a step, but it's not sufficient. Transparency means timely, complete disclosure, not partial release or delay like we've had. We were given a clear expectation under the law, and when information is withheld or delayed, it undermines trust and it honestly re-traumatizes survivors. And transparency isn't just about releasing some information, it's about following through fully and clearly as promised.
Obviously, you're holding on to very private information, and that would be names. So some people have asked survivors to release names and want to know the list. But can you explain and touch on the reasons why you don't share those? For fear or for litigation? I mean, there's a whole list of reasons why you don't.
Exactly. It's exactly what you said. There's a lot of fear with releasing names. It's also some of the girls are in litigation right now. And if we say a name, that person could sue us and we could lose our house, our home, everything we have, just by simply saying a name. So we have to keep those close to us.
Have you had some of those threats in the past?
I haven't personally had any threats, but I do know some of the other girls have.
So every time that you're in the headlines and we're talking about releasing information, I can only imagine that there's disappointment because there's not enough transparency.
That's correct. Yes, we really are doing this for transparency and for the public and for us as well, so that we can trust the justice system.
All right, Sharlene Rochard, thank you so much for sharing with us, and we'll certainly circle back as more developments continue. Thank you. I also want to bring in Spencer Kuvan, an attorney who represented multiple survivors of Epstein's abuse. Spencer, what do the victims you represent say about releasing the files? What do they hope it achieves, and do they have any concerns?
Thank you for having me. I think the biggest concern is a failure by the federal government to comply with the law. We've already heard that they're not going to comply. In other words, they're not going to release everything by tonight, which was their deadline under the law. And in addition to that, the problem is that you've got a law with no enforcement mechanism built into it. It says that they have to release this information, but ultimately it says there's nothing in the law that says what happens if they don't release the information. So our hope is that the press will file suit under this law and hopefully get a federal judge to speak on this topic. But the victims want the information released, and they want the public to see what Epstein has done.
Yeah, you've heard the stories from survivors of Epstein's abuse. What do you think this evidence will shed a light on? We've seen some new photos. And do you think it could force more accountability?
I hope so. I hope so. But I think that the accountability is going to come from the general public when they see this information. What you're going to see when this information is released, if it is fully released, is you're going to see hundreds of interviews done by FBI investigators back during the original prosecution of these cases. You're going to also hopefully see the DOJ emails between Epstein's lawyers and the Department of Justice to discuss why they entered into the sweetheart deal that they did. And most importantly, you're going to see the videos, the surveillance videotape from inside the homes in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and in the island. That is going to be what's significant. And when the public sees that, then they're going to have to hold certain public officials accountable for their actions.
Can you also shine a light as to why releasing this list is so hard for survivors? And would some of your survivors, your clients, be willing to do that at some point?
You know, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because of the people that are involved and the threats that have been made in the past. I have some of my clients that were directly threatened with not only civil action, but also directly threatened themselves, and their families were threatened if they spoke. So none of them want to risk that. Ultimately, it's up to the federal government to disclose this information. That's the way the victims feel protected. And the federal government should comply with the law and do what it says, release the information and show the public what they have.
So you clearly know the names, and is there a longer list than the public even imagines?
There is. I do, and there's a lot of information that I cannot disclose because the victims don't want it disclosed. But when the Department of Justice releases this information, I think that there will be a lot of answers, or a lot of questions that need to have answers given to the general public for actions that were taken by some very influential individuals.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So what is the when? When does that happen?
Well, that's a good question. Tonight at midnight is their deadline. So if they don't comply with the law, I would hope that people like the press, like your agencies and others, will file suit tomorrow morning because they failed to comply with the law.
All right, we'll continue to follow up. And again, the midnight deadline. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.